to the She Persists Book Club Author Series. My name is Krista Hines. I'm a freelance author, journalist, and I'm working on my first historical fiction. I started She Persists Book Club as a virtual space on Facebook and on YouTube as a place to have women come together to talk about women-centric historical fiction and connect with authors who are transformative storytellers and powerful female voices. Today, I'm super excited to get the chance to talk with Jen Mann. She is a humor writer and certainly is one of the most prolific, hardworking, and powerful voices, I think, in writing today. So I'm super excited. Say hi, Jen.
Hi. No pressure. Wow.
No
Okay.
pressure.
Thank you.
So I'm going to read your formal bio, so everybody people who aren't familiar with you can kind of get a sense of who you are and all of the things that you have done so far. So Jen's newest book is Midlife Bites. It's due out in January, and you can go ahead and pre-order it now on Amazon. Jen, what's the date that it's?
January the 4th.
Okay, so
January the 4th.
Probably by the time this interview airs, it'll be available for people to go ahead and grab on Amazon, and it should be widely available, I assume.
Yeah, everywhere books are sold.
Okay, great. So Jen is best known for her wildly popular and hysterical blog, People I Want to Punch in the Throat. She has been described by many as Irma Bombeck with F-bombs. Jen is known for her hilarious rants and funny observations on everything from parenting to gift giving to celebrity behavior to politics to elves on shelves. She does not suffer fools lightly. Jen is the author of the New York Times bestseller, People I Want to Punch in the Throat, Competitive Crafters, Drop-Off Despots, and Other Suburban Scourges, which was a finalist for a Goodreads Reader's Choice Award. She is also the mastermind behind the New York Times best-selling I Just Want to Pee Alone series. Jen is a married mother of 2 children whom she calls Gomer and Adolpha in her writings, and she swears their real names are actually worse. And just a little warning to those of you who are not familiar with Jen and tuning in, this episode might contain a little bit of strong language. So if you've got little ones around, go ahead and grab your headphones so that you can listen without any worry. Welcome, Jen. It's so exciting to see you.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So I want to talk all about Midlife Bites today with you. You're known definitely as a writer with a sometimes stinging sense of humor, definitely very witty. Your new book, Midlife Bites, is really funny, but it's also inspired by what was a difficult time in your life. Would love it if you could share with us a little bit about the inspiration for this book.
Yes. Well, the inspiration is my very own personal midlife crisis, I think. A couple years ago, I woke up and I looked in the mirror and I just thought, who is this old lady looking back at me and what is she doing and what has she done? And it shocked me because I had always heard, 40 and 45 are kind of bad. But it was right before my 47th birthday. And I really thought I kind of dodged that bullet because, to be quite honest, I've wanted to be a writer since I was 5 years old. And I didn't find any success in that until I was in my 30s. And so it was, so by 40, 45, I was doing great. And I was so happy. And I thought I really had sailed through that. And then I got to 47 and it just sort of all kind of hit me at once that I was like literally halfway through my life. And that although I had accomplished a lot and a lot of the things I wanted to do, I still felt like there was a lot more missing. And I sort of looked at my relationship with my husband. We'd been together, I don't know, maybe 20 years total at that point. And I just thought, has he always chewed like that? Is that what, is this going to be for the next 30 years? I'm going to watch him eat soup like this. And and we work together. And so we are home together all day long. And so it's just always sort of like, what did you do today? And I'm like, you were there. You're always there. And then I looked at my kids and, when I first started writing, my kids were cute and little and sweet. And I had to give them fake names because people wanted to steal them. And now, it's like they're teenagers, they're 15 and 17 now. But in those days, they were young teenagers and preteens. And I thought, they're so mean. Like, they're so mean to me. Like, they don't want to, they don't want to hang out with me. I had a whole series of books called I Just Want to Pee Alone. And the last one in that series I just put out was called, I Just Want to Hang Out with You, because my kids don't want to talk to me anymore. You have to coerce them with, like, I text them and say, anyone want dinner? Anyone want to go out? Like, I'll take you, I'll buy you food. And so we communicate through TikToks and Venmo requests. And, and I
That's
just,
so true.
well, and I just thought, and then I thought, are they ready to, like, be like members of society? Have I done a good job? Like, just all these things just sort of started piling up on me. And I started feeling like all this anxiety and the overwhelming kind of like coming in. And all I wanted to do was run away. I just wanted to run away.
Mhm.
And my husband was out of town, and it was sort of the middle of the night, and I called him and I'm crying, and he's like, are we going to get divorced? And I was like, I really don't know. Like, I'm so unhappy and I'm so confused about everything. And because the other thing I felt was guilt too, because I'm like, I am not running for my life. Like, this is so stupid. I'm sitting in, in a home, in a safe home, in a warm house in the middle of the winter. And, my kids are healthy. Everybody's healthy. Like, what is wrong with you? Like, why can't you just, like, be happy? Like, what is happening here? And so I was kind of going back and forth on that too, that I just felt so much like, what a bunch of first world problems, like, am I,
Mhm.
and then, but then I was like, men have midlife crisis all the time. Like, why can't I, and then I thought, oh, because I don't have enough time. Like, you should see my to-do list. There's no time to have a midlife crisis. And so then, my husband suggested that I write about it. I've had my blog for 10 years now, and I don't write much on it anymore. It's still out there for people to read and find me and stuff, but I don't really use it that often. And, but he was like, I think you need to blog about it. I think you need to, like, he's like, you have, and I do, I have this amazing community that I've built over time online, and they have been so supportive, and we support each other. And he's like, I think you need to write about it. And he's like, because I guarantee you, he's like, your community knows exactly what you're feeling, that you are not the only person. But it was still like, I mean, when I wrote a blog post called, Anyone Else Falling Apart, or Is It Just
Mhm.
Me, which is also still up on the blog. You can go read it today if you wanted to. And I wrote this blog post, and it was not funny. It was very raw and emotional. And I thought, as I hit, the publish button, I just thought, this is either going to start a really important conversation, and we're going to really be real, and we're going to stop talking about the weather, and we're going to have a real conversation, or I've just, like, torpedoed my entire, career as a humorist. We'll see. And so, but luckily, people really, women especially, really resonated. But even men, I have men reaching out to me saying, um, now I kind of understand my wife better. Like, I
Mhm.
understand sort of what she's going through. Because I think we all kind of joke about the male midlife crisis, but I think the female midlife crisis looks so different. And, we're angrier, we're more tired, we're more emotional, and we're not, out buying motorcycles or whatever it is that men do, and so it's like, I think they're just sort of like, what the heck is your problem? And so that's been nice. And then I've created a private Facebook group, around the same time, and we have about 27,000 women in there, and we
Wow.
just talk about everything and anything. So, and then my editor, at Random House, at Penguin Random House, she read my blog post. And so she sent me an email, like, probably, I think the blog post only been up for a couple hours. And she was like, stop crying and start writing. This is your book. Like, like, get to work. She's
Oh,
like,
I
you
love
want to know
that.
what the future is? This is the future. Get to work. And so I started
Totally.
writing in it, but it took me a long time to write this book. It took me longer than other books. It just was, um, it's easily the most personal book I've written. And it's the most kind of, she would send notes back, and she'd be like, more vulnerability. And I'm like, damn it. Okay. She was like, tell me more. And so, but, she was right. So
Yeah.
I'm happy she pushed me. Or I would, like, we'd get close to the deadline, and I'd have a whole different, like, vision, and I'd email her, and I'm like, hang on, I have an idea, and it's going to be better. Just, give me another month. so, so it just took us a while, but we got it done finally. Now it's finally here. Yay.
Yeah. Well, I remember reading that blog post when it first published, and I
Mhm.
remember thinking, as a writer, I was like, "What? She's living the dream. How could she be unhappy?" But it really was a great reminder. I appreciated your honesty. And I think that's probably what resonated with so many people was just that you were very candid about what life was really like, because we see so much through Facebook and Instagram of everybody's awesome lives. And I think it was just a great reminder that happiness really is an inside job. And I thought the way you broke it all down in many respects. I mean, you really stripped away you really did get vulnerable with the
Mhm.
reader in this book, which I thought was, I think that's really going to resonate with a lot of readers once they pick this book up. I'm curious, how transformative was this process for you as a writer and as a human being, you know?
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the thing. I've always sort of, I mean, part of my, my claim to fame is that, 10 years ago, I wrote a blog post about the elf on the shelf and how much he
Right.
drove me crazy, and how, it drove me crazy that we had to, like, make parachutes out of underwear for them and things like that. And I was like, you just move in from one shelf to the next. Like, Christmas is so crazy. Let's not make it crazier. And so I've always been sort of that honest person who kind of pulls back the veil and says, hold on, this is ridiculous. Why are we doing this? And so, but I had been sort of, and I'm not a person who, I don't only put up like rainbows and sunshine on social media and that kind of thing, but I
Right.
really hadn't been 100% honest. And so, and I think that was probably what was eating me up. And so now to this point, I try to be 100% honest at all times. Like, if I'm mad, I say I'm mad. If I'm sad, I say I'm sad. If I'm happy, I say I'm happy. If I'm grateful, I say I'm grateful. I used to kind of think that I had sort of like this persona that I had to keep up, that I had to be like, I have to always have it my shit together. And I always have to be like, I'm a badass, or whatever. Like, I don't even know what you said at the beginning, something about, you're prolific and you write so much. And you have all these other authors that kind of look at you and they're just like, you're living the dream. And I'm like, yeah, but it's still not like, and then you feel like a dick, then you're just like, God. And it's like, before we started taping this, you were talking about when I did stand up, and and it's sort of the same thing. It's like, I had this opportunity to do stand up and I didn't want to do it. I was like, oh, no, that's not for me. Like, I don't do that. But I had all these people looking at me that were like, they would like cut off their arm if the owner of the club had said, like, get on stage and do stand up for us, and they're looking at me like, what is your problem, you idiot? And that's how I felt like when I wrote this. I thought other writers are going to look at me and be like, what is your problem, you idiot? Like, you have so much to be grateful for and you're just not grateful, you dumbass. And so I think so I've tried to do better with that and tried to sort of like live in the moment, rather than like my galleys, or excuse me, not my galleys, my finished copies of Midlife Bites showed up this week. And they're a different color than the galleys. Like, the cover is a different color. And I'm sort of like trying to get used to it. And I'm like, do we like that? Like, do I like that? And my husband was like, what the hell? He's like, could you just smell the book and be excited? Like, he's like, the book is fine. He's like, the orange is a little bit different than what you expected, but like, stop this. And I'm like, you're right. And so I've tried to live more in the present, because I think, when we live in the past or we live in the future, that's just anxiety. And so I'm trying to live more in the present, and I'm trying to be more honest and real with people, whether they like it or not. I think
Mhm.
that's the other thing. It's like, I have a whole chapter in this book about how much I hate small talk, and that, I will not do small talk. And I had a friend the other day, he was like, so what are you going to do? Like, you go to like a networking thing, and you're just going to walk up to someone and be like, so abortion, huh? I'll be like, yeah. I was like, maybe I will, like, so I'm trying to be more, I guess, just more present and
Uh-huh.
more engaged with people. And I think I've learned a lot in that regard through writing this book. And I
Mhm.
figured out kind of why I was feeling that way and what I can do to stop. I mean, I'm not cured. I don't think anybody gets cured from general malaise. I think that's just,
Yeah.
especially when you're like living through a pandemic. But I think
Mhm.
it's more just sort of recognizing your triggers and not letting it spiral.
Yeah, and finding ways to move through it, which
Yeah.
I think you definitely did. And I think in many ways, with your group that you've got and just continuing the conversation online, you're helping people, you know, connect with what you're talking about and say, yeah, I mean, when I was reading this book, so many of these things, I'm like, oh my gosh, my mind's a little blown right now because so much of what you were writing I could relate to. And there's just something in that opportunity to connect in that way. And I think for women especially, we need to connect and talk through a lot of this stuff because we're racing around so much that we don't really stop all of the time to really think about what's, happening here.
Yeah. Well, and I think then another common theme that, because I kind of used my group as a kind of like a sounding board, I would kind of like, I'd put things
Mhm.
out there, I'd be like, I'm feeling this. Is anybody else feeling this? And one of the things I noticed that came up very early on, and it sort of came up organically, was friendships that, you and we know each other because we met in a play group years ago when we had
I
little
know,
tiny
it's
kids.
crazy to think
And
about.
right. And so, but it's like back then, like we knew we had to be socialized. Like we knew that we needed to get out of our houses. Didn't matter what we did for jobs or whatever. We just knew that we had to like go do some stuff, go meet some other moms, talk to them and commiserate with them about, these toddler years and that kind of thing. And then I think, as the kids got older, we all kind of drifted apart and we all kind of were like, oh, well, we were only in it for the kids. And I think we all kind of forgot that, like, no, we were in it for us too. And now that
Mhm.
we're middle-aged, it's so much harder. There are no more play groups. It's really weird if I was like, hey, would your 15-year-old like to go out? Would she like to come over and hang out and you and I can have coffee while they play quietly?
I know.
Like, and so it was kind of this common theme of like, how do I find friends? Where do I meet people? And because I think it's very lonely. I think middle age is very lonely for a lot of us. And I think
Mhm.
that, um, and for me, my friends have always lived on the internet. They've always lived on the computer. And so I thought, well, I don't really know how to like introduce you to people in real life, but I can bring you guys together on the computer and you guys can maybe be friends this way. And
Mhm.
so that's been really fun to see like the friendships that have come out of there.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing too. Just as much as we complain, or I complain sometimes about Facebook and social media, there are so many benefits to it in many respects, as far as getting to connect with people you might not get to connect with in real life, in person. Um, I want to talk a little bit about this period of time you write about in your book about when you decided to say yes to a few things.
Yeah.
And I love that you said yes to finally getting a dog, Jen, because I know you were not pro dog for a while there. But I always think, you talk about loneliness when we get to middle age, which I'm still trying to embrace the term middle age.
It's an
Um,
awful term. We need a better term, but it
I,
is what it is right now.
I think so. But I think about like Nora Ephron wrote
Mhm.
one time that she got a dog when her kids were teenagers so that someone in the house would be happy to see her. And I totally relate to that as my dog is right now whining at the door trying to get out. Um, but it's just I love that you did this. Oh my gosh, did you hear that?
Mhm.
Oh, sorry, that's my dog sneezing.
Oh,
Um, so you decided to say yes. You said yes to the dog. And then the other thing you said yes to was, I want to talk about this comedy club thing a little bit more. You touched on it. And the whole time I'm reading about it, I'm thinking about like, I don't know if you've ever seen the show, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel,
I
where she
have.
gets up and
It
stand
was a
up.
very marvelous Mrs. Maisel moment.
So tell us a little bit more about that moment of when, I mean, there had to be a part of you, maybe not, but maybe it's just me projecting, that wanted to run screaming out of the room with your hair on fire. Like, no way am I getting up on that stage. I mean, what was that like, saying yes and then getting up there?
Yeah, well, so I'm really good at setting boundaries, like probably too good. And so I say no to everything. Like I'm super good with telling people no. Like I'm all, when people are like no's a complete sentence, I'm like, hell yeah, it is. And so but when I was writing this book, I decided that I needed to say yes to more things because part of the reason why I was missing out on things, like I'm missing out on friendships or I'm missing out on opportunities or fun things because I say no because I'm afraid. Like I don't want to, or I'm lazy, I don't want to put on a bra and go downtown or or whatever it is. And so I hadn't really put it out there, but in my head, I'd been really trying to say yes to just about anything that I could, right? And so I have this friend here in town. Her name is Becky Blades, and Becky had this idea where she wanted to put on a all female stand-up comedy show. And she kind of envisioned like five of us would be on stage, and And so it was kind of early in the works. And I thought, and Becky's a doer. I'm a dreamer. She's a doer. And so I was like, you know what? I'm super busy trying to write this book, but if you make it happen, like I'll show up. Like you can count on me. Like I'll have something to talk about. And um, and so one night she texted me and she said that she was downtown or excuse me, just down the street, not even downtown, just down the street at this comedy club. And that she was scouting talent because she needed other people, other women to join us. And so she's like, could you come down? I'm thinking about having it at this venue and I'd like to see if we can find some talent in it. It's open mic night. And I was already in my bed and, bra off and book open. And I was like, oh, I don't think so. And then in my head, I'm thinking, you should say yes. You should say yes. But I thought, oh, my husband will say no, because he's always sort of like, why do you want to go out? Like, no, just stay home with me. And so I was like, this is weird. Becky wants me to come look at this club. And he's like, you know what? That's perfect. I'm going to bed anyway. You should go. And I was like, what? And so I got up, I got dressed, I went there. And I got there and she wasn't there yet. And I was like, huh. And so they told me that there was a comedy class that was being taught inside, like in the main room and before the show started. And I thought, oh, I'm a humor writer. I'd love to hear more about comedy. So I go in there and I realized it was more sort of like how to work the stage and how to work an audience. And I was like, oh, still interesting, but not really for me, but cool. And then all of a sudden the guy was like, so here's the deal, you get 3 minutes, it needs to be tight 3 minutes. And he's like, if you go over, I'm going to hook you off the stage. If you go under, I'm going to put you back on the stage because people are paid here, they've paid to get in here and be entertained and you will entertain them. And I'm just sort of like, and everyone's like, uh-huh. And I'm looking around like, what is happening? A tight 3 minutes. What is it? What? And so he's like, okay, well, I see some of you look a little scared. And so he's like, no big deal. He's like, just, pay your $5 cover charge and, be in the audience and you get, have your 2 drinks or whatever. I was like, oh, thank God. Okay. So I'm like digging in my wallet for my $5. And so I go up to him and I was like, here's my $5. And he's like, what's your name? And I was like, Jen. And he's like, what do you do, Jen? And I was like, I write. And he's like, what do you write? Funny books. And he's just sort of like standing there, like sizing me up. And he's like, so you're a storyteller? And I was like, exactly. I'm like, I'm not a comedian. I'm a storyteller. Like I said, 3 minutes, forget it. That's just my intro. Like I couldn't do a tight story in 3 minutes. I mean, I've probably been talking for 10 already just to tell this story. And so he's like, yeah, he's like, all right, well, I'll tell you what, he's like, I'll give you 5, which like, that is like a really big deal, like in that world. And that's when everybody looked at me like they wanted to like murder me. And like, cause like every head just like swiveled and like, what, she gets 5. And in my head, I wanted to say, no, I don't have 5 minutes. I have nothing. I can't. And he's like, just tell me a funny story and make me laugh. And he's like, I'll put you in the lineup. And so I went to the bathroom and I called my husband and I was like, oh, I'm going on stage. Like I have to have 5 minutes. I don't know what I'm going to do. What am I going to do? I don't have 5 minutes. And he was like, my husband is very much a realist and he really likes to keep me grounded. So he was like, literally no one in that room has ever heard of you, Jen, and they've never read anything you've ever written. He's like, so pick a story from your books or your blog or whatever. And he's like, make it the funniest story you can think of and then get up and tell the story. And he's like, you'll do great. He's like, just watch your time. You'll do great. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I could do that. And so the only reason why I could do it was because I'd already been on tour for about 2 years before that, like nonstop promoting my book called Working with People I Want to Punch and Throat. And so, and I have a tight 45 minutes that I can do. And so I'd been like, so I'd been entertaining like audiences and things like that, like through storytelling, but I hadn't really thought of it that to me, like stand-up comedy and storytelling are 2 totally different things. And there really are pretty related if because like the owner of the club was telling me, he was like, do you ever watch comedy on Netflix? He's like, all those guys, they all tell stories, everyone tells stories. And sure. And he's like, just tell me a story. And so I did it, and then he told me I could come back the next week and I could have 10 minutes. And so
wow, so he loved it.
So I went back the next week and I did 10 minutes. And then we did Becky's show and it was a huge success and she sold out the whole club. It was like the biggest show they'd ever had or something crazy. And then COVID hit because we were ready to take it on the road. We were like, all right, we're doing this. But then COVID hit and everything shut down. So maybe
you'll try it again? Yeah.
I think so. I mean, I had a lot more fun doing Becky's show because our audience was more geared to us. When you do the whole the whole open mic night, I would say 3/4 of the audience are people waiting to go on stage too. And so they're working on their bits or they're like chatting, they're not really engaged. It's not like a normal audience, I guess. And
Mhm.
so it was a little tough. Like it was literally my toughest crowd I've ever had. And I was like, oh snap. Okay. Because also too, like comedy is dominated by young men and I
Yeah.
don't tell stories for young men. And so they were kind of like, who is this old lady, joking about her minivan or whatever.
Is that what you talked about?
I can't even remember. I think I told this story. I think I told a story where I had a job interview and I growled and I growled at my potential new boss. And then I went like, "Arr," and I growled at him. And then I winked at him because I thought he was super cute. And I was like winking at him and doing like shooter fingers. And so I did not get that job, but it's a funny story.
I
So,
think I remember reading that story in
yeah.
one of your books.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a classic. So this book, Midlife Bites, you really, I mean, you tackle everything. You talk about everything from chin hairs to your relationship with your husband to, I mean, I have to tell you, I was like, I am staying away from mirrors that magnetize everything. But you also, I'm curious what, you talk about friends and purpose and happiness. You just talk about a whole bunch of different things. And you mentioned that really getting vulnerable was the hardest part of writing this book. Was there a particular section of the book that you felt like was exceptionally challenging to write?
I think it was probably hard to take a closer look at like my relationship with my husband. And I think it was hard to talk about like sex. And, I make a lot of jokes about that kind of stuff. And I talk about, oh, he's my asshole. But then I'm like, no, really, he's an asshole. And so, and like, but then I was like, oh, but you know what, Jen, you're an asshole too. And so, just kind of see that like, why maybe the communication between us was breaking down and maybe why we weren't getting along as well and the resentment that we have toward each other. I mean, we're still kind of like working through all of that. I think that that's just part of marriage that you kind of have to constantly we had grown apart and we were no longer communicating with each other.
Mhm.
And so it was hard to admit that and to be like, yeah, I got real selfish and I went my way and he got real selfish and he went his way. And we were just sort of doing our own thing and nobody was happy. And so I think that was the hardest part, was to talk about that and to sort of talk about like how we're still trying to get through that and trying to figure out what the answer is.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I feel like it seems to happen a lot when we get to this particular age where,
Right.
it's like we're kind of been operating in our own separate universes for a while.
Yes.
And then it's like, oh yeah, who are you
There's
again?
that guy. Well, like, cause like, remember when you were a kid and like some of your friends' parents would like get divorced after like 20, 25 years of marriage and you'd think like, that's so weird. Like, how can you guys do that? Like you've been together forever. Like if you hated each other, why did you even get married? If you, I realize now that it's not about like hating each other. It's literally about just not working to stay on the same path together. And
Mhm.
some couples just, I was reading an article just a few weeks ago by this like they're a marriage counselor and they were like, 20 years, 25 years, that's a good run with somebody. Like, you should part ways and be like, good luck to you. And you've got another 25 years in you for someone else. I was like, damn, like, okay.
Wow, I haven't heard that one
Yeah.
before.
Well, because like my husband and I will send each other articles, and his were all like, his are very much like, you just work through things, you power through it, you discuss it, till you're blue in the face and I'm, I'm sending him articles about like, you must fight, you must, be assertive and talk about what you want and what your needs are and what it's not being met. And then I found this article and I was like, dare I send this? Like, dare I? So instead we just talked about it and laughed about it and thought it was hilarious. But I was like, dang, that was cold. But I think, I mean, I'm at this age now where I don't know about you, but like tons of my friends are splitting up
Yeah.
and it's a lot of it has to do with that. That's just like kind of, we've run our course. And I was like, that's kind of a sad thing to think about. But and I would rather not do that. And I'd rather not break up. But yet things have to change though too, like we both have to change, and change is hard.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think having a sense of humor certainly doesn't hurt when you're in a relationship.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I mean, you can have a lot of things kind of going wrong, but at least if you can laugh about it sometimes, I think it helps personally.
Definitely. It definitely does. And I will say that is kind of the common theme that keeps bringing us back, is that we do laugh a lot, and we can laugh at ourselves and each other. And that helps tremendously. Cause even like if we're fighting, like someone might just be like, okay, this is such a stupid fight. Like, are we really going to fight about this? And then we just laugh. So I think that you think you're right. You have to be with someone who can make you laugh. And if you guys, and that was the thing, we were no longer laughing, like nothing was
Mhm.
funny anymore to either one of us. And so we had to find that again too.
So, what's it like? One of the things that a lot of writers get hung up on is really writing about personal relationships with, it's easy to talk about the jerky stranger that you ran into, to write about that person and just rip them apart. It's a little trickier when it's time to write about people in your life who are friends, family members, colleagues, whatever. How do you manage to do it? I
Mm.
mean, that's really the basis of so many of your stories in your books are about people and sharing stories about those folks. How do you move past the kind of the hang up of, oh, I don't know if I should share this story. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I probably should have more of that hang up. I think a lot of times, so every time I change everybody's names. So,
Right.
Krista might be in my book, but she won't be called Krista in my book. And so I
Okay,
change
but you're
everybody's.
gonna have to tell me what my name is.
It's Trista. It's Kristen. No, and that's everything. Like I would never do, like, Tracy is now Stacy. Like, I mean, I
Right.
pick really awful names for people. That's why my kids are Gilmore and Adolpha. Like I pick really awful names just because it's funnier. And that way nobody could ever be like, well, it sounds like my name. And then a lot of times I like not combine people, but I kind of like I change details maybe.
Mhm.
Especially all my books with Penguin Random House, they all go through a legal review. And so
Right.
there have been times that the lawyers have come back and said, like, can you change this job so that it's not too similar to the real job that they had, or could you change, I think we've changed um sexes of people, could we make this person a man instead of a woman, or vice versa. And so we do that to sort of help me. But then I kind of go by Anne Lamott.
Yes.
If you wanted me to write nice, I'm going to butcher the quote, but it's something about, if you wanted me to say nice things about you, you would have been nicer to me.
Yeah.
So,
You would have
and
behaved
I
better. Uh-huh.
and I kind of feel that way. That's sort of my mantra, that when people confront me and they say, I think I'm Mary in your books, and I'm like, well, Mary's an asshole. Are you an asshole? Like, were you a dick to me? Like, you tell me, are you Mary? And so, and that tends to work a lot. I tend and I try to punch up rather than punching down. I try to always sort of keep it, that I'm not attacking people that don't maybe deserve to be attacked or who are vulnerable. But with my family, it's a little bit different because they're all here and they all know, they know who they are. And my kids asked me to stop writing about them a few years ago, especially my son. Probably once he hit middle school, he asked me to stop. My daughter's 2 years younger. She would have an entire book about her if I would let her. Like I made this big deal that I didn't want to put them on social media. And half the time I'm doing a live and she's in the background, like, hey, everybody, how's it going? And I'm just like, yeah. So she's ready for her spotlight. But I still think she's only a freshman in high school. These are very awkward times for kids. Like, I don't
Right.
want to write about that or their peers. So I think that's why the focus had to go back on me again and kind of what I'm doing. My husband is always good to let me write about him, and um and to say what I need to say. And so I'm not so worried about him, but I always say that there's only 3 people that get veto power, and it's my 2 kids and my husband. And
Yeah.
sometimes they veto things, but very rarely.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I think that's a good lesson for all of us. So, for those of us who are writers, for sure. So, of course, midlife has its downsides, but I'm curious what you're optimistic about right now.
I am really optimistic about sort of the next stage and phase. When 2 years ago, I was worried that my kids were not ready to join society, and I didn't know how my son would go off to college and, wash his sheets or whatever. And what my husband and I would talk about when everybody was gone and out of the house. But I'm actually kind of like looking forward to that now. I feel more confident. Like, don't get me wrong, I think my kids still will not know how to do laundry. And I think that, you know, I mean, I just had my friend just put on Facebook yesterday that her son, he's doing an abroad study in London. He's going to school in London. He's coming home for Christmas, and she's like, and he's bringing his laundry.
All
Like,
the
of
way
course
from
he is,
London?
from London. And so, I fully expect that. But I was just in New York like a couple of weeks ago. I was in New York, and I went to I went to Zibby Owen's house, and she's another podcaster, and she's
Yeah.
an author. And she had this little she had like a salon for me and lunch, and I met this woman, and this woman came up to me, and she was like maybe in her 60s, and she was like, I just have to tell you, she's like, it gets so much better. She's like, it's just me and my husband. She's like, he has his interests, I have my interests. She's like this, I come here today, he doesn't know where I am, he doesn't know what I'm doing, he doesn't care. She's like, I run around the city, I do all kinds of fun things. She's like, we come together at night for dinner, and then we actually have something to talk about because we both were out like doing our thing. And she's like,
Uh-huh.
my kids are happy and they're doing their thing. And, and I was like, oh, that does sound pretty great. That does sound pretty amazing. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to sort of that, getting back to finding out what I like to do rather than what my family likes to do. So,
Yeah,
or not worrying, that's the thing with the dog though, because I was almost there, but then the dog needs me now.
I
And
know.
so
You're a dog
it's,
mom.
yeah. And so now I'm like, oh, I got to get home because Stan has to go potty. Like, I can't, like my kids can wipe themselves now, but Stan can't. So,
Well, at least he goes outside.
yeah, but it's cold and I got to take him.
Oh, you don't have a fenced yard.
No, I don't. No, if enough people buy Midlife Bites, I'll be able to afford a fenced yard. Do you know how much they were, like as much as a car? It's crazy.
I know. It was the first thing I demanded when we moved here was I need a fenced yard because,
Yes.
with little kids and then a dog and we had two dogs when we moved here and it was just like, oh, no, got to have the fenced yard. So yeah, make that high on your priority list. It makes
Yeah.
life a lot easier.
It will. It will. And he would love it too. The poor dog. He wants to sit outside all day. So he'd love
Aw.
that.
Yeah, I love seeing pictures of him. So tell me what you hope women take away from reading this book.
What I'm hoping that they take away are a couple of things. I'm hoping, one, that they realize that they're not alone, because I've realized now that I am not the only person feeling this. And so I
No.
want them to know that they are not either. I hope that they take away that some of the things that I did, I'm not expecting all of it to work for everybody. And I'm hoping that some of it will work for them. And I'm hoping that they'll figure out what works for them, that this will be the motivation that they need to sort of get on their path and find happiness and to find purpose and that sort of thing. I don't think everybody needs to get up on stage and do comedy, but maybe you want to adopt more dogs. I mean, I don't know. So I'm hoping that. And then I think the last thing I hope for is that we start having real conversations about aging and about this. I feel like, I wrote about that when we were, I came up through the mommy blogger ranks, and
Mhm.
we were so honest about everything that was going on with postpartum. And we were kind of the first ones to talk about that and to talk about just the difficulties of being a mom. And so I think that now so many of us are aging, and that we want to talk about that too, that it's like, it's no longer like a taboo topic, as my hope is. I wrote about a chapter in there where I sneezed, or I coughed. I had a cold and I was coughing and sneezing, and I wet my pants, right? And
Yeah.
I was like so embarrassed to tell my husband. And I'm like, he has watched me give birth. Like, I literally like shat on the table. Like, and I, like, and I've bled once a month for the last, 20 years with him. And he has seen me at my absolute worst. He's seen me puke. He's seen me do all kinds of things. And I can't tell him I peed my pants. Like, I can't explain to him why that is something that happens now. And he was shocked because, one, he has brothers. So it's just like, and their mom just never, ever talked about this sort of stuff with them. But, and so it's like, so my teenage son, I'm just like, yes, I peed my pants. And he was just like, mother, too much information. I'm like, no, it's not. Like, we all need to talk about this. Like, we all need to know, like, this is happening. And, and so I just think that we need, I think if men went through menopause, like, oh my God, there would be so many drugs and drive-through clinics that you could get anything you needed. But when a doctor, pats your hand and says, it's going to be fine for the next 5 to 15 years.
I highlighted that section in the book. I was like, oh my gosh, it's so true though.
Yeah. And he's like, and we don't really have great treatments. I mean, you could pick from, the bad ones we have and see if they work for you. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, this is all we know at this point about this. And so I'm hoping that we're a small generation, but we are a loud generation. And we have always been a very loud and mouthy group of women. And I'm hoping that we will pave the way for those who are coming up behind us, and that there will be more. Even now I've been seeing, because I have Google alerts set up for different words and things like that, so I can share things and topics in my groups. And I'm seeing, like, coming out of England right now, like there's a huge movement for women at work to be able to have, like, time off from work for menopause symptoms, and and things like this, like for treatments. And I'm like, there you go. Like, because you can't just sit in an office and hot flash. Like, you can't, it's like, it's miserable. So I think, I think it'll be interesting to see kind of what the generations behind us do, but I'm glad that we're kind of blazing that trail.
Yeah, I mean, say what you will about Gen X, but I agree that I hadn't thought about it that way before, but it's so true when we started talking more about postpartum. I remember doing lots of articles on postpartum, and this is just another topic to start kind of ripping away the veil, I suppose,
Yeah. I mean, mental health, look how much we talk about mental health right now with everything that's going on, and it's like, because growing up, I didn't know what postpartum, my mother never suffered from that. And I didn't know anything about it. And I didn't know, and you kind of whisper about it. And I realize now, looking back, like, I knew women that had that, but I didn't understand that's what was going on. And everybody just sort of whispered about it. And I'm like, and we're not going to whisper that I peed my pants. Like, like, I'm gonna walk around and be like, does anyone have a poise pad? Because it's going to be funny and we're gonna need them. So, I just think that we're very mouthy, and we've never been shy. Why would we be shy about this now? Let's not be shy anymore.
Yeah, I love it. So, Jen, what's next for you? You got anything else in the works right now? Or are you just kind of enjoying this moment of getting the books unpacked?
I should have something in the works. I really don't. I think once I finished this book, it was so exhausting, and I knew that contractually I couldn't publish anything for a while. And at that point, we are in the throes of homeschooling. I've still got one home who's on virtual school.
Oh, really?
And so trying to, like, make sure that she's in a good spot and we're getting everything she needs and that kind of thing. It has been kind of that full-time job. But I just started thinking this week about kind of what would be next. I definitely want to do more in this vein. Like, this was the pivot kind of thing. My editor, Pamela, when she reached out, she was like, people want to punch through has been great and it's fun, but, like, we've been trying to figure out where you should go next. And so she's like, and I think this is it. And so I think probably usually what I do is I kind of wait and see what's, like I said, what will resonate. And then, I don't know. I mean, I had another editor this week say I should write a book called, what Nice Women Don't Discuss Such Things, which I love that title. And I was like, that's a great title. And I was like, that I could totally write a book about that, like all just taboo topics, that we should talk about, that we don't talk about. But I would say it'll be something. I think midlife will be my thing until I hit old age, and then I'll write about old age.
You can write about the crone phase.
Yeah, people I want to punch in the throat at the old folks' home.
Oh, that's hilarious.
And then I would love to write women's fiction at some point too. I think that's always been the dream. That's always been kind of the goal, but I've just never done it. And so I guess I need to say yes to that this year and really start writing that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's been an interesting journey for sure. I've been working on my first fiction, and it's just so different, but it's fun. And it's just another form of storytelling, and I don't know, you might be the next Jennifer Weiner.
Oh, Please. I'm like, knock on wood. Wouldn't that be great? Yeah, no, I don't know. Well, we'll see. Or I'll just be Jen Mann. We'll see.
Yeah, that's right. Well, tell everybody where they can find you if they're not already finding you online. And I know
So you
you got
can
your
find me,
Facebook group.
my website is jenmanwrites.com. And I am Jen Mann, the author, not Jen Mann, the Canadian artist. When you search Jen Mann,
Oh.
she comes up first because she has better SEO and she's more successful. She's doing great. I love her. She seems fabulous. And I would love to have some of her artwork in my house someday, but I'm not her. I'm the other Jen Mann.
Got it.
And so that's the best place. And then I have a funny story to tell you really quick though, when you said Jennifer Weiner, because I do get email for her and Jen Lancaster and Jenny Lawson and another Jen. I can't think who it is. So it just cracks me up that there's so many of us with that name and nobody can keep track of us. So
The Jens.
all the Jens. So I'm like, yeah, I would love to be Jennifer Weiner, but I'd also love to just be Jen Mann.
Yeah. I think you got it covered.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for doing this today. This was a lot of fun, and it's always fun to see your face and to get a chance to chat with you.
Well, I appreciate you having me. This was great.
Yeah. Well, you take care, and everybody go get your copy of Midlife Bites.
Yes, please. See
Bye,
you
Jen.
later.
Thank
Bye.
you.